Hello, and welcome to a very special live recording of Thoma Bravo's podcast, Behind the Deal. I'm Thoma Bravo Managing Partner Holden Spate. We're coming off an amazing second season of Behind the Deal.
Well, if the auto companies want you to be bigger than you are, you've done them a service because you bought $300 million in revenue when we bought J.D. Power. Today we're approaching $900 million. How'd you pull that off?
Well, you guys were helpful. Thank you for advice and capital.
We initially created this podcast to give an inside look into the transactions and partnerships that shape our portfolio. Over the last year, our partners sat down with our portfolio company CEOs to explore the stories and lessons behind some of our most dynamic software deals.
Orlando never flinched. He got into his car, drove south down the 101, and pipped the deal from this other private equity firm. The rest was history after that.
I remember that very well, and it was an exhilarating evening of deal making, and it was also the first step in our partnership.
Yep.
But perhaps the best deal we made was with our listeners. Behind the Deal has received over 500,000 downloads and topped the U.S. business charts on Apple Podcasts.
Firms change, firms evolve, partners leave, there's spin-outs, people start new firms. And at Thoma Bravo, we've been at this together now for over 25 years. Nothing has changed. We're still here doing the same thing. And frankly, as we say it all the time, I feel we're only getting started.
Thank you for listening. We appreciate your support. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Thoma Bravo Managing Partner, my friend, and more importantly, Behind the Deal co-host, Seth Boro.
This is Behind the Deal, live from Miami.
Well, that was awesome. I'm a little nervous here. I've not done a live video podcast before in this format, but I think we're going to be okay. We have an awesome topic today that I know a lot of people have a lot of interest in because we get this question constantly about AI and what's going on in our portfolio. Here today joining me from three of our flagship companies in Fund 14 and Fund 15 are Sumit Dhawan from Proofpoint, Mike Capone from Qlik, and Charlie Gottdiener from Anaplan. It's a nice representation of applications with Anaplan, security, and in the cyber world, the email cyber world with Proofpoint, and then data and analytics with Qlik. Maybe just to level set, AI now is in the vernacular constantly. It's something that a couple years ago, of course, we knew about, but we weren't talking about it as much. And it would be great just to get each of your perspectives, in terms of, how we got here. So why is it today that we're, talking about it? It's front of mind. It's hard to read a business article or a company article without talking or thinking about AI. What's changed, Sumit? Maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Listen, I sort of say Proofpoint has always had AI. We did cybersecurity. You can't have people defending all these other attackers. You have to use technology, and the technology needs to keep learning. So by definition, that's classical machine learning. So I jokingly say Proofpoint did AI before AI was cool, and I call it sort of the before cool era or BC era of AI. So we have done all forms of machine learning and AI models to essentially prevent attackers that are constantly attacking through email and other forms of communications that people have. And AI is the technology, or the models is the way you beat all of, you do pattern detection, and then you detect this as a potential attack, and you don't let it go to the employee or the end user, as we call it in the tech jargon. And now what's happening is with the generative AI, basically, it's consumerized, where everyone can experience the power of AI because you can actually talk to it. It can generate responses, images, all forms of modals that are available in terms of how you experience AI. So it's readily available, and it's readily available for both good guys like us to use, as well as in the world of cyber, the bad guys, where AI can be used to potentially create new forms of attacks, and AI can be used now for preventing those new forms of attacks. But in the world of cyber, we are certainly seeing more and more how this generative AI, both in terms of threats as well as how you prevent the threats, to become more and more relevant and important going forward.
Mike, what you've obviously in Qlik been delivering insights to your customers in various ways over time. How has this shift to generative enabled you to deliver more value? And I'd actually be curious also, Charlie, to hear from you when Mike is done in terms of what kind of business value you're able to generate today with this major platform shift that's taken place really over the last year.
Right. Well, Sumit is right. First of all, this is not new. I mean, we were writing AI programming when I was in college, some 20, 30 years ago. This kind of breakthrough into consumer with ChatGPT and LLMs has been enabled by the massive computer power that's out there today. It's available to us in cloud computing and just more sophistication in kind of the techniques. We at Qlik, we've been getting ready for this moment for the last 5 years. We were a analytics company, and yeah, we had AI built into our platform. We've been doing NLP, natural language processing in our platform. We've been able to interact with data using modern AI techniques for a long time. But what's changed is with this massive compute is the ability for companies now to harness all of the information at their fingertips. And this kind of explosion of AI and this kind of renaissance that happened last year was a huge wake-up call to companies who suddenly realized, I have to build a foundation to take advantage of AI. You can't just plug in an LLM or ChatGPT. At the end, you got to do the work. And so what we've seen is companies really start to scramble to build an infrastructure and a foundation that secures and governs their data for AI and make sure that you don't run into the kind of problems that you're seeing out there today around false positives, hallucinations and things. And so the series of acquisitions that we did, including leading up through Talon, was really to get ready for this moment. So we've been getting ready for this moment for the last 5 years to be able to harness data for enterprises to actually effectively use AI as part of a corporate structure versus consumer, writing high school term papers, for example. That's not what we're trying to do.
Yeah, so before I talk about the value points, I just want to add one thing. I agree with everything that both of you said. I think the other thing that's important to recognize is that AI and ML was really the domain of data science experts, right? And that expertise really isn't needed as much as, it's still needed to make advances, but it's not needed to engage in AI like it once was, because it has been consumerized by the LLMs and the open AI architecture. So I think that was also a breakthrough, right? Where you just don't need the data science expertise to engage with AI that we did 2-3 years ago. Now back to Anaplan. So we think about creating value for customers with AI in 3 different ways. The first is driving more insight for them. So Anaplan, what customers do on Anaplan is they forecast and plan their businesses. And what and we've had AI products now for over 5 years, what AI allows them to do is to make more accurate forecasts, because we're running ML algorithms, because it's mostly machine language models across much larger data sets, much deeper data sets, much larger data sets, both first party and third party data. And that improves forecasting. So that's kind of the first vector of value. The second is access. So this is where we get into generative, right? We're really allowing customers at all different levels of the organization to access their models in a much simpler way. So today, primarily, people who access their Anaplan models are model builders. They're experts that have to go into the platform and dig out the insights. It's not hard to dig them out, but you have to know something about the platform. Tomorrow, we're going to leverage, or really we have a prototype now, where people are going to be able to ask their models questions using natural language. So a CFO could ask for a forecast, right, on his way to work and get that answer back without having to go through an intermediary that's expert in the platform. So that's today, and then that's actually getting tied to workflow, so they could actually send the question to somebody as a follow-up. So that's really second point of value. The third is really efficiency. So we think about developing a co-pilot for model building. So today you have to be an expert to build a model in Anaplan. That takes a lot of time. You start from scratch, and what the co-pilot will do is it will build a model for you, and then model builders become editors as opposed to creators. That's much more productive and efficient.
Sumit, in cyber, there's so many threat vectors And clearly the advent of generative AI has created yet another one. How are your customers managing those threats today? Maybe walk through an example of what you've seen in the field, just in terms of some of the more modern day threats that are coming out of the use of, as you said, the bad guys using generative AI. Of course, it helps that group as well, and it's very well funded. And then what are you doing on the flip side to help combat some of these new threats, and how quickly have you had to react to that?
Yeah. Firstly, I think every one of you has probably experienced an email or a text message that comes in, either trying to make you click on something, or sometimes even something coming from your CFO or CEO for a gift card that you want to buy. It's pretty common attacks, both for fraud as well as for basically planting a little malware into your network or your computer, which can then eventually become ransomware attacks. And many of your firms have either been through it or always prevent from doing it. Turns out more than 3/4 of those attacks start from email, and they continue to be that way. So if you think about cyber always started from network. Hey, I'll prevent my computer network and make sure bad guys can't get in. But social engineering, which is people attacking people, is the biggest surface area for most attacks coming in. And that's what we focus on. We have 3 trillion emails that go through our system, about 1.5 trillion SMS messages that go through our system, which give us a mechanism to build models that can predict which is a good email and what's a bad email. So at any given point of time, we are able to see, as a company, probably the only company in the world who can really see ahead of the curve on what is the emergence of new types of attacks, which is what, Seth, you were asking. So using all this data, we have a threat research and threat intelligence team that continuously publishes to our customers and the world how the attacks are evolving. What we are seeing now is that generative AI at this point of time is being used more and more by attackers, which we can tell. We can tell when an attack, which is coming in through an email or a spurious-looking website that people are, users are being induced to click on because they look familiar. They're all being created using generative AI. So in other words, the same attacks, but are being created by generative AI. So what does that mean? That means oftentimes these attacks are created with non-native language speakers. That's no longer an issue. So we can't just sort of make these emails and websites through language assessment if they are threats or not. That's no longer the case. We have to throw that out, and we have to use other indicators to tell if it's a threat or not. Secondly, there is more context you can build. Oftentimes now, generative AI-based attacks are not going to be where they send one email to a bunch of people as a campaign. Instead, because they are being robotically generated, generative AI enables effectively a robot to have a conversation with several individuals in this room, which is more contextual to you as individuals, which makes the models that we have to protect against those kinds of threats even more sophisticated. It needs to have more information on, if I'm as a sender sending you those kinds of emails and trying to induce you to click on something, then using our technology now, which is also based on these large language models, we can detect, Sumit never really sends an email to Orlando asking for credit card numbers or,
Just once.
I just once. So that would basically create a contextual model to say this sender this is not the right context for this type of email. And that's the kind of sophistication both threat actors are using and we are evolving in our models to make sure we can protect. And that's a good thing in my assessment for incumbents such as us, because I started this by saying we have 3 trillion emails a year that we process, 1.3 trillion SMS, 17 trillion URLs that we see. What does that mean? That means we have the data. We can train these models better than anyone else. It's hard for an incumbent like us to be disrupted by someone because building a model is not necessarily the hard, building the tech and the code for these models is not the hard thing. Training that with the right model is the hard thing. And that's what incumbents benefit from.
Clearly, the importance of data is something that we've talked about for a while, but it feels like we're now in a new realm of the value in owning that. And Mike, I know you're enabling customers in this journey. Can you help us understand what your customers are asking for today as they get ready to use these large language models to create value for their customers or internally? And what does that look like at Qlik? Are customers ready today? Do they have budget? Do they have the talent? What does that process look like right now?
Yeah, sure. So, a year ago, we were all staring down this explosion, and there was almost a panic out in the market, right? And boards were yelling at CEOs saying, do something, do anything. And people were announcing initiatives, spending money. But really, it was just to show that they were, paying attention and not being afraid of being disrupted. The good news is a lot of that is settled down right now. The hype is sort of settled, and now we're into this phase of people being a lot more thoughtful, which is great. And what they're saying is, I need to build a foundation. I need to build the right foundation for my future of AI. And really, it comes down to three things. First is, how can I get the maximum value? The second is, how can I govern it and be secure so I don't land in jail? You saw the EU just passed some really sweeping legislation recently around what can happen if you misuse AI. And then the third is cost, right? There's cost associated with building out these infrastructures. On the data side, what we've been building, what we do is really simple, which is data from anywhere, any source, cloud, on-premise, wherever, at high velocity in real time into kind of modern cloud data lake structures, but also governed, cataloged with veracity, proven data lineage, all in one place. So you can govern it and know not only where your data is, but where it came from. And then you can analyze it using modern kind of techniques like analytics and AI and natural language processing. And then something Charlie said before is really important, you can action it. So once you get the insight, because CEOs will tell me, all right, I got the answer, the analytics and the AI gave me the insight, but now my company doesn't do anything with it, right? So the ability to actually take that and put it into a workflow, put it into an automation, send an alert, integrate to an RPA platform, super critical. Otherwise, you don't get the value. That's what happens. So that's kind of the holistic view of things. And then what I would say is on the cost side of things, people are starting to get the first anniversary of their cloud data lake bill, right? They're starting to understand what's happening and how much money they're spending to move data around, and they're freaking out, right? They're saying, well, this isn't sustainable if I want to harness all of my data. So what we do is we built a series of analytics apps using the power of our analytics platform on top of our data platform to help customers manage putting data in the most cost-effective place to still drive the right outcome, but make sure that, when you're paying for compute or you're paying for data movement or storage, that you're putting things in the most cost-optimal place and still getting the AI outcome. And that's really how people are thinking about it. And the good news is it's moving at a more thoughtful pace now. It's not just do anything to say that you're doing something. There are budgets, people are spending. A lot of it's top-down, CEOs saying, I'm going to earmark a lot of money to get on AI, but now that money's being deployed very, very thoughtfully.
Charlie, obviously, you need internal talent to work with all these new technologies. I don't know if you consider this a platform shift or an enabling technology, but maybe help us understand what that has looked like as you're running the company, and in terms of what sort of internal resources you need to actually turn this into a product that's revenue generating for you. And has that been a challenge given how quickly it's moved, or how have you managed that so far?
Yeah, so I'll go back to something I talked about earlier. So, this all started with really a data science sort of academic experiment, right? That's where machine learning really started. It became more commercial and practical over time as we get harnessed, more compute, larger data sets. And so the shift that we've seen in talent is assessing whether our data scientists can make that shift to be more commercial, to drive commercial outcomes from their machine learning models and really drive AI that's going to drive the business. So I talked earlier about us leveraging generative in, I didn't tell you the name of the product, Ask Anaplan. So the CFO could actually query models through natural language. That's a harder shift for academic data scientists. They don't think about the world that way because they want to run the next experiment. They want to build the next large language model that may or may not have a practical application. So that's really our challenge, right? Is kind of figuring out who can really make the leap to commercial, because we're not an academic institution, right? We want to leverage the knowledge of academic institutions and we want to commercialize it. So that's the journey that we're on. Well, we've got a fairly big team that's trying to make that journey that's in Israel that came through an acquisition for us.
Mike, you mentioned the EU legislation that came out last week. Maybe walk people through, because you're very deep in that. You have formed an AI council around governance and ethics. I think it'd be great just to get your perspective, and then Sumit and Charlie, your perspective on, just from a governance and ethics perspective, how this is being managed internally at your companies, because it is a big issue.
It's a huge issue, and just like every other technology, the innovation is going to outpace society's ability to kind of regulate it, right? It's just how the world works in today's world. And so we in the corporate world actually have an even greater obligation to govern this, and to make sure that what we're deploying, the tools we're deploying, and the technology is used in the right way and can be governed in a way that you can control the ethics of it. And so we're really thoughtful about that at Qlik. And for the most part, I'd say most companies in our industry are behaving that way. Some aren't, but most are. And so, if you think about my favorite kind of paradigm is if you think about social media, 20 years ago, and how that started taking off and what that's done to kind of teenagers in today's world, would we have approached that the same way? Would we have let that go the way it did, completely ungoverned for so long? Would we have been more thoughtful about it? I think that's where we are with AI today. And so we at Qlik spent a lot of time thinking about our responsibility to the ethics and the morality of AI. And what we know is that we don't know. Like we haven't figured everything out. So we formed a council of people mostly outside of industry, people from public sector, people from academia. These are four very respected individuals, come from like Cambridge and things like that, who actually advise us and our customers on the ethical deployment of AI and how we can do this in the most, capture all the value. Certainly we're in the value creation business, but also do it in a thoughtful way where people view us as a trusted partner that helps them be successful the right way rather than the wrong way. The EU legislation is a great example where they really, if you've read it, they've gone quite deep and they've categorized different uses of AI, some of it being completely prohibited. So using AI to predict criminal behavior, even to predict ethnicity or gender, it's some things you might not be able to do anymore in Europe with your platform if this really takes hold. And they've categorized different ways, and it puts a huge burden on companies to make sure they're using AI the right way and governing their data the right way. And the EU, they never do anything like light, right? The EU Parliament. So the penalty is up to 7% of turnover, 7% of revenue if you screw it up, right? So you really need to be very thoughtful, very reminiscent of GDPR. And so, we have to help customers, all of us have to help customers make sure that they're doing this not only fast and capturing a lot of value, but the right way, morally, ethically, and in compliance with the law.
Yeah, I think given with Proofpoint, I mentioned we have data from customer data. So one of the big things, in addition to obviously our models being trained the right way and are doing the right things that are compliant, we also have to be extremely careful with data residency laws that are there. So data residency laws are different across the globe, and they become even more important and critical when you're applying these models on them. And there are, it becomes quite complex. Like, for example, I think everyone here has heard of or maybe even familiar with or experienced copilots from Microsoft. One of the banks that maybe we have folks here as well, I heard from them that they were doing a pilot, and Copilot was linked into certain business applications as well as, and I don't know if it was Copilot or some other generative AI chatbot that was prepared that was connecting to different business applications, and they were running a pilot, and they enabled a set of users to start doing queries. And once you enable business unit users to have that form of free-form access to information that's in multiple business applications, the type of queries that people start making can expose the information that's sometimes regulated and protected in certain ways, which you never thought anyone would sort of be able to access. So all of a sudden, it is opening up a whole new dimension of data security, protection, governance requirements for customers. And so I do see, in terms of adoption of the technology, even from the customer end, where they are all going through this sort of phase of how they are going to tackle cost and governance elements. And for our end, we have to be much more thoughtful in terms of what we do with our own data governance for all kinds of regulations that exist from sovereignty perspective, residency perspective, or in general compliance because of the new rules that are coming in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think many of you may be asking, so what now, right? What do companies do? I think the news is actually a little better than it was, 5-10 years ago from a data privacy perspective, because there are regulations and there are models that companies have followed for data privacy and data governance. And so there are techniques like privacy by design that really govern the use of data in product innovation in most companies. Not every company is great at it, but at least these kind of concepts exist. And I suspect AI will leverage those to begin with, but we'll need, as Mike, you point out, a lot more governance because it can be a free-for-all. And privacy by design is actually a pretty rigid process that forces data governance rules. But if AI is in everybody's hands, then it would be hard to really manage that and police it. So, but I do think the news is a little better. There's a starting point, and most companies have data privacy and data governance committees set up as a starting point. And that's where I see a lot of companies starting, is in those committees.
There's you hear talk about the fact that generative AI could be an issue as it relates to IP and the competitive landscape within certain industries, especially within software, where maybe there's an ability to spin up a new company quickly. Can you share your thoughts on that? How big a risk is it to your businesses? What should we all be thinking about, as investors in software as it relates to that? Maybe Sumit.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think, as I mentioned, in the world of cyber, broadly speaking, there is infrastructure and human level protection. We focus on the latter. That's the biggest surface area of risk or threats. And the generative AI is actually, to some extent, a bit of a tailwind for us because it increases the potential of attacks, makes creating an effective attack easier and more available and accessible to bad actors at lower cost than them trying to do it themselves. Okay, so we are seeing that as potentially a tailwind, and as long as we have the right technology to defend against those types of attacks, in general, that sort of grows the need for a sort of robust solution like Proofpoint. Secondly, as I mentioned, at the end of the day, you need more sophisticated models to prevent against those types of attacks. And those models can only be, sure, you can have coders write code faster, but without access to that data, you're not going to be able to develop those models. And so there is a inherent incumbency benefit. Can you get data elsewhere? Maybe, possibly, but nowhere the same quality of data that we have as an incumbent when we are already serving enterprise customers and delivering their critical asset like mail and other data protection solutions. So I think second is that it does give benefit to incumbents. I'd say third, I don't think we are sitting still, right? We are leveraging the power of generative AI and these large language models to create more upsell and cross-sell opportunities. For example, you may have all experienced it. You may have fat-fingered yourself, wrong person and sent, not just an attack, but just information that was not meant to be sent to someone that you sent an email to, and then you sort of sent a note, oh, can you please delete it? That was not for you. It's happened to all of us. We've built, because we are in the mail flow, we've built a solution, and we already have the context, the example that I gave where I sent that attack to Orlando. Instead of an attack, it may have been just an email that I accidentally was sending to Orlando, and our technology now would prompt me to say, hey, do you really intend to send it to Orlando? This doesn't look like, the type of information you usually share to him. So it's a nudge as AI technology. And that's extremely helpful if you can think about even in your businesses. In large banks, there are teams of 40 to 50 people that are simply checking outbound email to all sorts of clients if that email is the right one to be sent or not. We can take all of that cost out and create that incremental monetization, all because of the power of Gen AI. So enabling new use cases because of the technology. So A, it's a tailwind for us in the cyber. B, incumbency helps us, doesn't hurt us in any ways. And C, we're not standing still. We're building new monetization and new solutions that are serving real problems and for our customers, which are much, much easier for us to bring to market than anyone else.
Charlie, do you worry about somebody building an Anaplan competitor quicker and easier now? Now the code's easier to generate and you don't need to be a specialist anymore?
I don't, primarily because if I'm exposing my customers' data to public generative AI models, I'm done, right? Because they now own my customers' data. And so we have a proprietary platform that really protects that data and the usage of that data. So to me, a lot of this comes back to data at its core, right? Generative AI is going to allow us to get a lot more insight out of data. And so, what we're working on, to advance the insight dimension that I talked about earlier is really leveraging generative AI to do more dynamic forecasting. So really early warning systems, right? So you can imagine a company, let's say it's a manufacturer, and they've got distribution, they've got big retail customers, think Walmart or Target, really big customers. And now they've got external events that they actually want to put into a early warning system like weather, right, would be the simple example. So if my big customers are running a massive promotion on my product and I've got a weather event, I could be pretty out of sync with where inventory is in my distribution centers, and I could really risk, irritating them because they have a lot of stockouts when they've got a big promotion coming, right? So we're going to use AI to actually create early warning systems, and that was a simple example, across multiple data sets, so we can help our customers forecast even more accurately and actually get ahead, really get in the predictive business so they can avoid stockouts in my example. And rather than, what are we going to do about a forecast when we know we're going to miss inventory levels, right? So that's kind of where we're headed with generative AI.
We talked a lot about our portfolio today and driving efficiency and currently running at a 40% margin, sometimes more. It would be great if you could walk through examples internally. So we talked about your product, we talked about what you're doing to customers, the market. How can you leverage this next generation of AI technology across your organization? Like maybe we'll start with you, to drive operational efficiencies in all aspects. And where do you see it today and where do you see it going?
Yeah, today I would call it the low-hanging fruit exercises. So where we get a lot of lift, so for example, code generation, right? Where at the end of the day, we write software. The ability to actually generate code that's fairly, standard and reusable is with AI has just gotten much, much better. We've gotten so far beyond, kind of open source to now where those tools are publicly available. And that's how we're able to run our R&D percentage lower than a lot of our competitors, right? In addition to low-cost locations. The area we're having a big impact right now is in sort of the sales and marketing area, where we're able to do a lot more targeted selling, targeted marketing, using our own capabilities inside of Qlik, and then using some third-party tools like 6 Sense, et cetera, to actually look at kind of buying patterns, who's in the market, let's target them, make sure, our worst enemy is not knowing, right? Data and BI deals come and go. before we see them. Now with kind of the tools out there, we can look out in the market, look who's doing certain searches and predict who's about to likely buy our software, our competitor software, and actually go target that. So that'll be, I think that's the, I don't want to say the easy stuff because none of it's easy, but it's right in front of us, right? It's right there. And then, going forward, I think, for us, we're a pretty simple business, right? We buy software and we sell software, but our opportunity to help our customers who've got massive amounts of data, who've got a lot of, I'd say kind of muddy processes and, just trying to fight through stuff is going to be almost unlimited. And the real kind of differentiation we have, I'm really excited about the talent business because, a lot of people think that having more data is better, and more is not always better. Sometimes better is better, right? So the ability to actually take the data that the customer has. We were talking earlier, Seth, about a large automotive manufacturer who built their own infrastructure, their own LLM, their own ecosystem. And what we're helping them do now is harness all of the data inside of their four walls, including the data that comes off the cars and the sensors and everything in real time, and make decisions about inventory, about where to put the next charging station, for example. And that's like a huge productivity lift for them. And then to protect IP, nothing goes out. And when they bring data from the outside, they can prove the veracity of it. They can curate that data and make sure that it's not going to inject bad data or bias into their data set. So for me, that's the most exciting part of all this, is what we can do for all of our customers.
Sumit, it'd be great to hear about how today you're at mid-30s margin. How can, what do you see operationally, internally to move that to, mid-40s? Is it 50%?
We're being recorded, just so you know. So
yeah, it's a commitment.
It's a commitment, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I think first of all, we're in a similar state, starting with, you can call it low-hanging fruit, although the results of those have been astonishingly positive in the code development. Just developers have embraced it. The success that we are seeing in terms of code that comes in as a suggestion that people accept, which basically is another proxy to show that there is productivity intrinsically being improved in terms of how fast we can build new code. So that's certainly there.
So, but how are you managing the security on that code, which I know is a big issue?
No, we same thing as the these are sort of where the code is. Code right now sort of goes into your own instance of GitHub largely. So these are appropriately sort of governed private instances of code that is running. So the right security for IP protection is being put in place. But we do think there is improved productivity without any compromise of IP leakage that's been done. I think the one where I'm most excited about, where we are just starting to do, is more predictive analytics on churn, because we have a lot of indicators of information from customers on usage of the product and how through that we can create patterns and very quickly then have the right reactive or quickly corrective measures in a more proactive manner put in place. Today, a lot of that is done somewhat manual, somewhat reactive, and just, you can imagine resource allocation is not sort of really been put in place as proactively as we could. So using models, you can think of them as still fairly simplistic AI models, but these days those models can greatly improve your gross retention rate. And all of a sudden, just a single point of gross retention rate can give a significant boost to the earnings, flows through. So I think that's the one, in addition to sales and marketing, I'm excited about. We're starting on that. And then there is some education, tech support, again, public information that's available, how we can just streamline it so that there are less calls coming in and improves the productivity of when we actually serve the customers calling in. We are doing so in a faster way and whatnot, because usually there's a lot of time taken by tech support engineers to train them and whatnot. And these days, no one really wants to call. So if there is an agent that can serve a large volume of support requests, that's another investment we are making to make sure we can be more efficient.
Great. Charlie, anything that you're seeing in your business?
So very similar themes. So I won't repeat what these guys said, but one thing I'll add is we're we're starting to leverage AI pretty deeply in sales productivity, and that's an area that we're working on improving in the business, which should give us some real margin expansion. And we've leveraged a third-party AI tool to do this, but one of the things that we discovered is that we went into last year thinking that you had to have 8 meetings a week to reach your quota as a salesperson. That activity level would drive it. What we learned was that it's actually not 8 meetings. It's actually 4 meetings with director level or above that generates actually 125% of quota achievement. And so then the question becomes, well, who has the relationships, right? What's the relationship map look like? And of course, we find that we're not where we need to be to generate those 4 high-quality meetings a week across somebody's portfolio. And so that allows us to then ask the next question, which is how are we going to leverage AI to access the right relationships, whether it's third-party data via LinkedIn or something else. And that's really what we're working on now, because we know that that relationship exists, that better meetings with more senior people allows us to focus the activity and be more productive at the same time. And when we marry that with a product that we actually have, an AI product called Predictive Insights, and what that product does is it helps customers identify the ideal customer profile. So now you've got the right customer profile, you've got much more targeted meetings, and that should be a much more productive formula for driving new bookings. So all of that leverages AI.
Maybe with the last question, how are you balancing where we're at today and the pace of innovation just in this area going forward? And how much time are you spending on the future versus the present? Because I think maybe this platform shift is moving. I don't know if it's a platform shift or the technology innovation here is moving as fast as anything we've seen, and the absorption rate has been really high. And the fact that you're using it today and we're talking about it in a way that's very tangible is impressive, given we're really just a couple of years into this generative AI phase. But Sumit, how do you think about that and manage that, just that pace of innovation, and any thoughts on what's next?
Yeah, I think first of all, this technology, as many of you have probably read, in terms of just adoption from global population, it's off the charts in terms of ChatGPT adoption. So in terms for us, we have to be, as a cyber defense company, a step ahead of the bad actors. At this point in time, the internal machinery at Proofpoint is assuming that the bad actors have free-form access to this technology. The threats will be created using this, and we are leveraging the technology to its fullest when it comes to building the defense against it. That's a topic our CTO office is sort of squarely responsible for it. We did an acquisition of the company called Tessian, where a lot of effort is going in to integrate. It brought in a large language model of our own with the right sort of cost structure that can build a very rich contextual graph. You may have heard this term, which essentially creates a relationship between large number of objects so that you can very quickly, identify patterns that are off the norm. And so both through organic efforts as well as our investments via M&A, we are on that front. We're not assuming this is something that's going to happen in the future. We have to stay a step ahead, and that sort of gives us credibility with our customers. That creates momentum with our customers. It drives somewhat of growth as well for us. So that's sort of our assumption when it comes to our core business, cyber. For areas that we have data protection portfolio and business as well, which is our growth business in addition to email security. Our data protection business, we are closely monitoring what tangible innovations we could build so that when customers start adopting AI for their critical lines of business application use cases, the example that I was giving where there was a chatbot talking to various applications, how our data protection engine how we can ride that wave as that adoption happens. So for defense solutions, we are assuming it's here. For our data protection solutions, We are very closely monitoring how and when the customers adopt it so that our innovations are not behind. But it's a topic we're discussing on an ongoing basis. We can't afford not to.
I think for us, we built a lot of structure to make sure that we're in tune, right? So I talked about our AI council, which is really important, right? That gives us one perspective. We have a large customer council that advises us on AI and what they're doing and what they're seeing in the market. And we have representation from all industries on that council to help us go. I'll tell you though, the biggest secret weapon we've got actually is our M&A strategy and our partnership with Thoma Bravo. We've got Mike Hoffman and Monish. And we're constantly scanning the market, looking for cool AI companies and what they're doing. Because a lot of times the best source of innovation is to look at what's out there in the market, where's the venture money flowing, and what's going on out there to predict kind of what the next wave of innovation is going to be. And that is super helpful in kind of understanding what we need to get ready for, what we should be buying. And as VC dries up in some of these opportunities, we're going to be all over them, trying to buy pennies on the dollar for what went into these things.
Yeah, and I would say, we're going at a measured pace, right? We're kind of earlier in the hold than I think some other companies. And we've just gone through a big transformation, or the early stages of transformation. So we're going to continue to take our AI legacy, leverage it into the products and the platform that we have. I can imagine a future, and I've started talking to my head of product and technology about this, where we have a leader of AI products. And that will help us with an M&A strategy to augment what we do there. And that's a conversation which we've just started. But I suspect we'll get there sometime this year because it is such a big topic, and it's a big topic for innovation.
Well, the shot clock is almost out. This has been great. I think the thing that's most interesting is oftentimes, you hear a lot about in the venture industry, innovation taking place in areas like AI. One of the big takeaways today that we would like everyone here to understand is that our companies are innovating in and around these areas in big ways with massive R&D budgets, not only delivering innovation to customers and to the industry, also creating policy, thinking about ethics and governance, which is incredibly important, but then also taking this new technology and driving it into internal operations to produce better business results. So thank you for the great work. It's been fascinating, and we really appreciate your time and you being here today.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure.